6 months you're there at Marsal Lyons Literary, and then they're like, well, let's just go ahead and promote you to an agent, right?
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
yes, I'm incredibly lucky, and yet there's a story there of you networking, of you being tenacious. Obviously, you were a good assistant, or they wouldn't have recommended you to Marsal Lyons. And then 6 months in, they could have probably gotten a lot more use out of you as an assistant.
Well, I kept assisting because the thing that I'm sure you've heard from other agents who you've talked to is since agenting is a commission only, everybody has to have pretty much a second job while they're starting to build their list. And what I was told when I first started taking on clients is that the expectation is that it will be 5 years before you can make a like livable income as a full-time agent. So pretty much everybody has a second job. And I was just lucky enough that my other job was just being an assistant. So I stayed the assistant in the office. And then in my own time, like evenings, weekends, I went through my own slush and started developing my own clients, which was also just a very fortunate position to be in. And yes, I was very fortunate to be promoted that fast. I think I do have a skill set that's really well suited to agenting, so I took to it very quickly. But something about the West Coast agencies and specifically Marsal Lyon, it's my experience and what I hear from other agents is it's a lot easier to advance. In a lot of the New York agencies, you have to be an assistant for a year, or they have like very, very firm benchmark progress. And with Kevin, my boss, Kevin Lyon, at 6 months, she was just like, you are doing really well here. Do you want to take on your first client? The first client I took on was something that I had found in her query slush pile and really loved. And it wasn't for her, but she thought like, I think you're ready. And if you want this, you can take this on. But I think that if I had been at some other agencies that I've heard of, I wouldn't have been allowed to advance that fast. And I think that I would have gotten frustrated. I was really glad that I could just go as fast as I could go when I was trying to build the client list and the business at the beginning.
There's just not as many competing book people on the West Coast as there are on the East Coast, or?
I think that's part of it, but I also just think that it's like a different ethos, like a lot of the New York agencies have been around for 50 years, they're very set in their ways. And out here, I think probably the oldest, specifically West Coast agency is the Dykstra Agency. And I'm not sure exactly how old they are, but they certainly haven't been around more than, like 20, 25 years, I would guess. So things are just a little less calcified on this coast, is my sense.
Gotcha. And if New York would listen to the show and take my advice and branch out into, like, I don't know, Indiana would be wonderful, or anywhere in the Midwest where the rents are cheaper and you can get a far more diverse staff, diverse in every kind of way, age-wise, income-wise, experience-wise, background-wise. All kinds of folks could come in that have experiences that aren't identical to all the other folks that are maybe in the other houses.
Absolutely. And I mean, I think especially now that they've all the publishers have figured out how to do full-time remote during COVID, I just don't understand why they can't do what you're proposing and, take on people who aren't localized to New York. There are some editors who are in with the big New York houses who are not in New York, but it seems to me like those are more senior editors who have like proven that they don't have to be in the office. Whereas, as you say, if they would open that up to more entry-level positions, it would open those jobs up to a lot of different people who, just like I felt when I was graduating college, like are not ready or don't have the money to just move to New York and try to cross your fingers that someone in a publishing house hires you.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we are 100% agreement. Did you hear this, New York? We worked that out for you. It's solved.
We've solved publishing and we're only 15 minutes in. So where will we go from here?
The economy. Let's work this out. So you said about 5 years before you start making your income as a literary agent. You start in 2014. As we record this, it's 2022. How'd you do? Was 5 years about it?
5 years was about it. That was actually a pretty spot on estimate. That was about when I had sold enough that I had things that had earned out and were bringing in steady royalties. And I had clients who had made foreign sales and that money was coming in addition to the new things that I was selling. So yeah, it seemed like a long time when I first heard that, but it was right. 5 years.
So I'm assuming during that time you're gathering your clients, you're building your list, you're making sales that now are bringing in royalties that are part of your overall compensation.
Yep, exactly. So I was signing all the way through that time, and selling all the way through that time. But it just takes a while to build up, which is the same thing I tell my clients who are wishing they could quit their day job after they get their first book deal. I often say, like, I'm not gonna tell you how to live your life. That's not my job, but I usually recommend that the time to quit your day job as an author is after you're making the big chunk of your money on royalties, because that's the steady income in publishing. Those advances, it's really hard to be an author who's living just off of advances, or an agent who's living just off of advances, because there's a lot of pressure to sell the next thing, or there's not going to be more money coming in. Whereas once it's earned out and you're getting that every 6-month royalty check, which, that's not that often, could be more often. But it is just more sustainable when the royalty money is flowing.
Well, it seems to me we've nearly fixed publishing. This will do it. If they're going to break up the advances into 4 or 5 chunks now, break up those royalties. What's wrong with quarterly? What's wrong with monthly?
Why not? The answer to that is paperwork. So much paperwork, and they are so behind on the paperwork they have already. But they could hire more people,
Especially if they're in the Midwest.
Right, exactly. Oh man!
Come out here and pay Indianapolis rents. You won't believe how much space you can get for what you're paying there.
I'm from Michigan, so I will believe it. I definitely have those high school friends who are still in Michigan, and I look at the houses they've been able to buy. Oh, the amount you paid for that house would buy a 1-bedroom in San Diego. Why have I made these choices?
Well, they could revitalize Detroit. There's all that beautiful property available, dirt cheap and sustainable living.
It's happening, actually. Mostly in the urban core, but there are some really cool up and coming parts of Detroit. Recommend.
All right, world peace is next. We're going to knock this out.